Imagine waking up one morning to find a letter on your doorstep. Not just any letter, a bill. A bill demanding you pay a tax for the hair on your face, or worse, for being single, or for not fighting in battle. Absurd, right? Well, history has a funny way of turning the ridiculous into reality. And today we're diving into 5 of the most sinister taxes ever imposed on humanity, part 2, each one stranger and more outrageous than the last. But before we begin, let's play a little game. Which of these taxes do you think was the most dangerous? Was it the beard tax, where your facial hair could cost you your life? Or the bachelor tax, which punished those who dared to stay single? How about the cowardice tax, where running away from battle meant financial ruin? Perhaps the dog tax, which secretly wiped out an entire class of people? Or the blue dye tax, where wearing the wrong color could get you executed? Stick around. By the end of this video, you'll not only know the answer, but you might never look at your own taxes the same way again. The beard tax, when your face was a price tag. Our first tax takes us back to 16th century Russia, where one man believed that beards were a threat to progress. That man? Tsar Peter the Great. Peter wasn't just a ruler, he was a visionary. A man obsessed with modernizing Russia, transforming it from a medieval backwater into a European powerhouse. And to do that, he needed his people to look the part. In 1698, after a trip to Western Europe, Peter returned home with a mission: make Russia modern. His first target? Facial hair. Anyone who wanted to keep their beard had to pay a hefty beard tax. But this wasn't just a cash grab. It was a symbol, a statement. Pay the tax and you received a special token proving your right to wear a beard. Refuse? Your beard was forcibly shaved, often in public as an act of humiliation. The tax wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a battle for identity. To the deeply religious Russians, beards weren't just hair, they were sacred. Shaving was an attack on tradition, on faith, on masculinity itself. But Peter didn't care. He doubled down, increasing the fines, stationing officials in marketplaces to hunt down bearded offenders. Even noblemen weren't spared. The tax drove a wedge through Russian society, between modernists and traditionalists, between obedience and rebellion. And if you think that's bad, wait until you hear about what happened to bachelors. The bachelor tax, when being single cost you more than loneliness. Fast forward to 18th century Europe, a time when marriage wasn't just a romantic choice, it was a duty. Governments feared population decline, and they were willing to do anything to make people settle down, even tax them for staying single. Enter the bachelor tax, a financial punishment for those who refused to marry. Countries like Britain, France, and even parts of the U.S. imposed this tax, all with the same goal: force men into marriage. In 1695, England introduced the tax under the rule of King William III. It targeted men over 25 who weren't married, assuming that if they weren't supporting a wife and children, they should at least be supporting the state. But the tax didn't just drain wallets, it sparked rebellion. Some men outright refused to marry just to spite the system. Others found loopholes, pretending to be engaged indefinitely. Some even went as far as entering fake marriages to dodge the fees. And then there were those who simply disappeared. Evading the tax meant fleeing to the countryside, away from prying government eyes. Still, as bad as the bachelor tax was, it's nothing compared to what happened if you were a coward. The cowardice tax, the price of running from war. War is hell, but surviving it? That could cost you your soul and your savings. Picture this: you're a soldier in 12th century England. The battlefield is a nightmare of screams and steel. You drop your sword, turn and run, not from cowardice but instinct. You make it home alive, only to find a tax collector waiting. Congratulations, he sneers. You've just been drafted into debt. Meet scutage, the cowardice tax that turned fear into a luxury. Born under King Henry I, this wasn't just a fee to skip battle. It was a psychological trap. Pay to avoid war? Clever. But refuse to pay? You're branded a traitor. And by the 13th century it became a weapon. Here's the twist: scutage started as a pragmatic tax. Kings needed cash, not corpses, to hire mercenaries. But by King John's reign, it mutated into extortion. Deserters? Charged double. Peasants who couldn't fight? Taxed for existing. And the rich? They laughed all the way to their safe, gilded castles. The system was rigged. For nobles like Reginald, scutage was a nuisance. For Thomas? A death sentence. No money? No mercy. Your family starved. Your name was cursed. And the crown? It profited from your despair. By 1215, scutage funded entire wars that created more debtors. It became a vicious cycle, taxed the fearful to fund more fear. But here's the kicker. Even after the Magna Carta, the scars remained. Soldiers returned home not as heroes but debtors. Communities collapsed under the weight of cowardice fines. And the lesson? In the game of power, fear is the ultimate currency. Today we don't call it scutage. We call it selective service or tax penalties. But the principle remains: governments profit from your fear. The rich still buy their way out. The poor? They pay in blood. So next time you hear duty, ask yourself, who's really cashing the check? The dog tax, a law that wiped out the poor. Dogs, humanity's most loyal companions. Faithful, protective, and in 18th and 19th century Europe, financially ruinous. It started as a tax to curb stray populations. At least that was the excuse. But in reality, the dog tax was a brutal economic weapon, one designed to target the poor. You see, for the wealthy, dogs were trophies, pampered with gold collars and meat fit for kings. But for the working class, dogs were survival. They guarded homes, herded livestock, and even helped hunt for food. And then, suddenly, keeping a dog came with a price tag. In Germany, Britain, and France, failure to pay meant your dog was seized, or worse. Some were taken and killed by tax collectors. Others? The owners were forced to do the deed themselves. Imagine the horror, faced with the choice of starvation or executing your most loyal friend. Desperate people tried to resist. Some hid their dogs in cellars. Others forged tax records. But the government? It had no mercy. The poor were stripped of their last line of defense, left exposed and vulnerable while the ruling class carried on with their pedigreed lapdogs. The streets, once filled with barking, fell silent. The rich got richer. The poor lost not just their pets but a piece of their dignity. So, was the dog tax about public safety? Or was it just another leash around the neck of the powerless? The blue dye tax, the color that became illegal. Ever wanted to wear blue? In medieval France, that was a luxury crime. The blue dye tax wasn't just about money, it was a status weapon. Only the nobility could afford the tax, turning the color of the sky into a symbol of oppression. Peasants, artisans, even merchants, if you weren't aristocracy, blue was banned. And so, a new kind of rebellion was born: fashionable defiance. Underground dye markets emerged, where craftsmen risked everything to create forbidden blue fabrics. Tailors operated in secret, selling illicit clothing under the cover of darkness. Smugglers transported dyed garments in hidden compartments. Entire families were arrested simply for owning a blue scarf. But the ruling class? They weren't just satisfied with fines. No, they wanted theatrics. Public floggings, imprisonment, and even execution awaited those who dared to challenge the color caste system. A commoner caught wearing royal blue could be whipped in the town square, a walking warning to everyone else. Yet, rebellion is a stubborn thing. Some nobles, disgusted by the injustice, secretly funded dye houses. Messages of resistance were sewn into the linings of blue coats. And eventually, as all tyrannical rules do, the tax crumbled under the weight of public defiance. So next time you throw on your favorite blue jeans, remember, you're wearing a color that once meant revolution. And there you have it, 5 of the most sinister taxes in history. But before you go, let's ask the real question. Which one chilled your soul the most? Was it the beard tax, where masculinity came with a receipt and the government had the audacity to charge for facial hair? Or the bachelor tax, where staying single wasn't just lonely but legally punishable? Maybe it was the cowardice tax, where fear itself became a financial liability and running for your life meant running straight into debt. Or perhaps it was the dog tax, which wasn't just a fee, it was a death sentence for the pets of the poor, forcing people to choose between starvation and slaughtering their loyal companions. And let's not forget the blue dye tax, where rulers turned an entire color into a crime scene, ensuring that power draped itself in wealth while the commoners were stripped of even the right to wear the sky. Absurd? Yes, but also terrifying. Because if history teaches us one thing, it's that the people in charge have never run out of creative ways to squeeze every last penny and ounce of dignity out of their citizens. They taxed beards. They taxed fear. They taxed the love of a pet. So what's next? A breath tax, a fee for the air you inhale? A thought tax, a charge for every opinion you dare to express? A memory tax, because after all, history itself is a commodity? Laugh now. But remember, the most ridiculous taxes always start as an idea. And some ideas never truly die. So tell me, which of these sinister taxes would have been your worst nightmare? Drop your answer in the comments, and while you still can, stay free, stay skeptical, and most importantly, stay untaxed.